Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Jim McKeith, Chief Developer Advocate for Embarcadero Technologies, and thanks for joining us for User Experience Excellence Cross-Platform Design Patterns. Today our presentation is by the amazing Serena DuPont. She is our Senior Product Manager and resident in-house design specialist, if you will. She's got a great eye for design, pays a lot of attention to the little things that make the difference on each platform. So she's going to talk to you about both the theory and the practice of good design. First, she's going to talk about some of the design elements that make for a successful design on each platform in order to meet expectations of users and for store approval. And then she's going to go into some of the best practices of the technical details using Fire UI, using FireMonkey, creating custom styles, laying your forms out, and having everything look and behave beautifully on every platform. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Serena.
Thanks, Jim. My name is Serena DuPont, and I'm a Senior Product Manager here at Embarcadero Technologies. I wanted to thank you for joining me for today's session on UX Excellence, Cross-Platform Design Patterns. So let's get started. I'm going to talk to you today about best practices for getting your applications accepted into both the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Now, when it comes to building applications for mobile devices, it really is a good idea to build those applications with the types of design patterns that users have become accustomed to and would expect in an application. So, for example, that includes swipe gestures for navigating between screens, enabling functionality such as pinch and zoom for zooming in on images, and also implementing standard user input patterns. So for example, if you have a sign-up form that's part of your application, you want to automatically shift that form up on keyboard focus to make it easy for the user to enter their information. Now, when you're adding navigation to your application, for example, the ability to swipe between forms, it's also nice to add an animated transition. And we have pre-built actions that you can utilize for that within the product. And we also have templates that help you get started. So when you go to File, New, Multi-Device Application for both Delphi and C++ Builder, you're able to choose from some pre-built templates that also include those types of transitions built in. Another important point to make is that when you're building applications for multiple devices and multiple devices with different resolutions, it's important to provide graphics in multiple resolutions as well. So for example, background graphics, icons, etc. You want to provide those in multiple resolutions such as 1x, 2x, and 3x to ensure that they look crisp on all target devices. Another important point to make is that you don't want to replicate your entire desktop application for mobile, and you don't want to clutter up the screen with too many UI elements. So it's really important to build functionality based on the form factor, and with the Fire UI Multi-Device Designer in Rad Studio, it makes it really easy for you to work with a master form to lay out your application and then design it for each form factor specifically. So for example, you can show and hide controls on an iPhone that you would show on an iPad form factor, and then customize it accordingly. When it comes to mobile applications, it's really also important that they don't require long tutorials. They're really designed to be simple and easy to understand. So sign-up forms should be simple, should not be very long forms. And if, for example, you have multiple sign-up areas, you should divide them up between different tabs or pages, so to speak. Making app registration optional is also another good idea for success because it allows the user to have a look at your application before committing to sign up for it. Now, when it comes to building your app menus, there are different types of menus that you can choose from. A toolbar-only navigation is well suited for single-screen applications. So, for example, if you have a look here in the top right at the screenshot, this is an email inbox screenshot. And so, for example, in that case, the toolbar-only navigation works very well. You have the key functionality such as new emails, delete, flag an email, etc. right there. And then we have the three-dot icon for an overflow menu. This is something that's quite popular on Android and has been popular on Android for quite a while, as it allows the user to easily access additional functionality that's not available or accessible via an icon on the toolbar itself. Toolbar-only navigation can also be used in conjunction with a tab control for multi-screen navigation and usually consists of either text buttons or glyph buttons. Now, tab bar navigation is used to divide your application into key focus areas. It also provides a very intuitive user experience, and it's something that's allows the user to know and easily find the key functionality within the app. So for example, home, search, new email, and then the last tab could be settings, for example. So it really makes it easy for the user to access the key functionality at a glance. It's usually displayed with annotated glyphs on the bottom aligned on iOS, and displayed with text on Android at the top. And we have built-in behavior services in FireMonkey. And if you set it to platform, the setting for the tab control, then it will automatically display itself as a top-aligned tab on Android and a bottom-aligned tab on iOS. Now, home screen navigation is another type of an application menu that's become quite popular, and you can see in many different types of retail applications today. Similar to the tab bar navigation, it puts the focus area right onto one screen and makes it easy for the user to find the type of information that they're looking for. So we recently did a great webinar on RAT Server, and as part of that, we built an IoT solution demo. And this demo you can see represented in the screenshot on the right here, and it really focuses on the key functionality that the retail shop wanted the user to access. So for example, search for products, scan a product by barcode, find in-store deals, and then find special offers. And it's usually arranged via a grid-like layout. Glyph buttons can be also annotated with text. And this is also something that could span across multiple screens. So for example, you could set up a client-aligned tab control with multiple tabs, set the tab position to none. That would allow you to display and work with the tabs as views, so to speak, and then you could have multiple tabs that show glyph buttons arranged in a grid-like layout, so you'd be able to swipe between multiple home screens. Now, the drawer menu is another very popular application menu that's seen in many different types of applications today that you're probably using on your smartphone. It's a main app menu that's hidden by default. It's invoked via this little hamburger icon, and it really allows you to take advantage of more screen real estate by hiding the application menu for the key app functionality and only showing it as the user invokes that menu. So by default, usually on phone form factors, the slide and drawer is shown in both portrait and landscape mode, and then on tablet form factors, a split menu is shown in landscape mode. Now with RAT Studio, we provide support for both native and custom styling, and that supports also 1x, 2x, and 3x images. So if you're, for example, as I previously mentioned, loading in custom images, iconography, etc., you're easily able to load in images using multiple resolutions to ensure that those images look crisp on all target form factors. The Style Lookup property makes it really easy to access the available style properties within each style, and you can also use the built-in style designer to easily customize the colors, etc. Now, the FireUI multi-device designer makes it easy to create your application by using a shared master form and then specific views. Now, this allows you to lay out your application and then customize it for each form factor. And if we have a look at the screenshots here, the one in the middle that says Android Master, that's our master form. And you can see that's using a multi-view control that's displayed as a docked panel, so you have a split view layout because it's designed for an Android tablet. And then to the left of it, you see that same application running on an iPhone in the simulator. And as you can see on that screenshot, it is shown with the slide and drawer. So we have the ability to automatically, with the Team Multi-View control, customize the layout of our applications and have it behave by default as intended. And then you can, of course, customize those properties as well. Now, with the FireUI Multi-Device Designer, you can also preview your application at design time using the Multi-Device Preview feature. And with the FireUI App Preview feature, you're able to see what your application is going to look like on device as you're designing it in the IDE. Now, what are the key component differences between desktop and mobile application development? So if you have experience building applications for desktop and you're just getting started building applications for mobile, I think this is an important table to have a look at. So for example, if you currently are using TreeView or TGrid in your desktop application, you should be looking at using Listview or Listbox in your mobile application. If you're currently using Radio Group or Radio Button, you should have a look at creating a segmented control using Speed buttons, or using a Listbox, or for Android specifically, you could also use a Radio Button. If you're using a checkbox on desktop, you should be looking at using Switch for both iOS and Android. And if you're just focusing on Android, you could also use a checkbox. If you're using Menu Bar or Main Menu on desktop, you should be looking at using a Toolbar with speed buttons. a T-Tab control or the T-Multiview control on mobile. So here you can see the preferred mobile UI components for both iOS and Android. And we also have a great demo in the product that's called the Mobile Controls demo that allows you to quickly see the preferred controls for both iOS and Android. Now, let's talk about what you should do with toolbar buttons. So on a toolbar, you should always use T-Speed button for toolbar buttons. It's important to also set button alignment. So for example, if we look at the refresh icon here, we have that aligned to the right with a margin of 5. And then we also have the trash icon aligned to the left with a left margin of 5. So it's really important that you set both the alignment and also margins. When you're using both titles, so for example, address book, along with buttons, you want to make sure that the align property for the T-label control, the title in this case, is set to contents, and that the text settings horizontal alignment and vertical alignment property is set to center. All controls that are parented to T-Toolbar must have an alignment value set. And if you set the alignment property to contents for T-label for the title, you ensure that everything is laid out and aligned properly along with the icons that you're using. Now here are some don'ts for the application title. You should never align the application title to the left, as you can see here. And this is a good example. You don't have any other icons or buttons or anything on the form itself, and the title is just aligned to the left. And that should never be the case. It should be aligned to center by default. And you should use style lookup equals tool label as the styling property for your application title. And again, you should use T-label, style lookup tool label aligned to contents, and then set the horizontal and vertical alignment for the text to center. Now, when it comes to navigational back buttons, they're certainly an important part of applications. It's important not to use them for canceling an action. So you don't want to use a back button to allow the user to cancel out of a screen. You should instead place a cancel button onto the toolbar, for example. You don't want to place it on the bottom toolbar, and you don't want to choose an alignment other than left. So a back button should not be displayed on the bottom toolbar, should always be displayed left aligned on the top toolbar, and it should never be right aligned either, as you can see in the screenshots here. So it shouldn't be used to cancel an action, it shouldn't be top right aligned, it shouldn't be bottom left aligned. It should only be used for navigating to the prior screen, always shown in the top left corner, and you should use the T-Speed button with the back tool button style lookup property. So you can see that here. We have the back text, and using text is optional. And on Android, by default, it always shows the icons. That's the standard style. Now here are some don'ts for using the tab control. No icons selected for tabs on iOS. As you can see in the first screenshot here, it's really important that tabs on iOS use iconography. On Android, they should never be aligned to the bottom. The default alignment for tabs is on the top. And you shouldn't have more than 5 tabs on a phone form factor. So as you can see here, tabs are commonly displayed at the top of the screen on Android, and they're traditionally displayed only with text. Now, with the T-Tab control in Rad Studio, we have behavior services support in FireMonkey built into the control that allows you to automatically display it as a top aligned tab on Android and a bottom aligned tab on iOS. This will happen by default. You can override that if you want, but that's the default behavior. So it makes it really easy for you to know what the standard design guidelines are for this control by just using the built-in behavior services. Now on iOS, typically the tabs are shown at the bottom of the screen, and they should show both text and icons, which can be set via the style lookup property. So you can select the tab control, you can select the tab item, then go to style lookup property and select your custom icon. You can select one of the predefined icons, etc. You can customize the colors and more. Now, when it comes to tab controls, one of the things that I just mentioned is you should not use more than 5 tabs on a phone form factor. So what if you need additional navigation? So for example, in that case, tab 5, as you can see in the first screenshot here, you can use the More Items tab item style lookup property. You could parent a client-aligned list view or list box to that tab item for additional navigation. Now on Android, it's also popular to, for example, display an overflow pop-up menu for additional items. And alternatively, you could also use the T-Multiview for your app navigation. Now talking about T-Multiview is our smart menu component. It automatically adjusts itself depending on form factor, orientation, and target platform using FireMonkey's behavior services. So for example, on a phone in both landscape and portrait mode, by default it's displayed as a slide and drawer, and there are different properties that you can set, for example, the placement, the mode for the slide and drawer, you can select the duration of the sliding, etc. For a tablet form factor, by default, the T Multiview control represents itself as a docked panel in landscape mode and in portrait mode as a slide and drawer. And those defaults can be changed and adjusted as needed. Now, when it comes to creating a segmented control, you want to make sure that if you're using a segmented control on the toolbar, you first parent a T layout to the toolbar control, and then set T layout.align to center and parent the buttons to the layout. And then you can select the alignment for the first button to left, the second to center, and the last one to right. Now, when you're creating a segmented control, you need to make sure that you shift select all the buttons that you want to have part of that segmented control, and then set a group name. It should be the same group name for all of them to indicate that they're part of the segmented control group. And then you can select each of the individual buttons and select the segmented button styling to customize the look of those controls. Now, when it comes to using a switch control, there are a couple things to keep in mind. On both iOS and Android, you should never parent a T-switch to a toolbar, and you should never place a T-switch onto a form without using a list control. So it should never be floating on the form by itself. So here are some examples of good practices for the T-switch control. On both iOS and Android, you should always use a switch control in a list item anchored to the right with margins set, as you can see in the screenshots here. And if you're just developing for Android, you could also be using a checkbox to enable an option, for example, and on a settings screen, but a T-switch is really recommended. Now, there is no concept of a radio group on iOS, so you should not be using radio buttons. Instead, what you should be using for iOS and Android, you should use either a T-list box, as you can see in the banking selection screenshot here, and in that you can leverage the accessory of a check mark to set a check mark for any of the items that you're selecting. Or you could set up a T-speed button with the group name to set up a segmented control to allow the user to select an option. On Android specifically, you could also use radio buttons, as they are common on Android but not on iOS. Now, when it comes to general button use within your application and on your form, it's important that all buttons have the same height and they use even spacing and anchors. And that ensures that your buttons look nice across all the form factors that you're targeting. Now, when it comes to using T-listbox, T-listbox is really designed for short lists with no to minimal scrolling, specifically settings lists and input forms, as you can see on the screen here. And there are several different style properties that you can set with T-listbox. You can use the group header item for the listbox headers. There is the grouping kind property of grouped and a transparent listbox style, as you can see here. And then for additional descriptive text above or below the settings, you can also use a T-label with listbox item label as the style property. And if you're parenting a T-edit to any of your listbox items, so for example, if you're creating an input form, as you can see here for customer information in the screenshots, you could use a T-edit with or without the transparent edit style property. And we have many great demos included with RAS Studio that show you how to do just that. So for example, if you go to multi-device samples user interface and you go to the settings example, you can see this demo that you see in the screenshots here. We also have a keyboard forms demo that shows you how to set up the UI for an input form. Now, Listview is designed for long, data-bound scrollable lists. It has built-in support for various item appearance modes that you can choose from by default. For example, you can either use the built-in appearance modes, or you can fully customize the look of your list view and the entire layout using the list view item designer. With FireMonkey, we also provide support for custom styling, as I previously mentioned, and as part of the bonus pack, you get access to a premium style pack for multi-device applications that allows you to easily give your application a fully custom look. Now, when you get started building your first multi-device application and you go to File, New, Multi-device application, either Delphi or C++ Builder, if you're using RAD Studio 10.1 Berlin, you're presented with the master. And on the master, you can select from a Windows style, an OS X style, an iOS style, and an Android style. So I'm going to change this to the iOS style. If you're looking to build your application and have the same exact layout for all target platforms and all target devices, then you can just work here on the master. So I'm going to put down a toolbar and a label. And I'm going to client align my label. Then I'm going to go to
style lookup and select tool label. This will ensure that the proper styling is applied across all the platforms, so that on iOS it selects the proper font at runtime with a bold font for the titling, and on Android it selects the Roboto font, and so on and so forth. So if I go and scroll down here, I can then go to text settings, and I can select horizontal alignment to center. So I client aligned the label and selected horizontal alignment center. And now you can, for example, change this to application title. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tab control. I'm also going to client align this. And then I'm going to right click on my tab and add a couple tab items. And as you can see here, by default, with the iOS style selected, the tab control and tab items, the tab items are aligned to the bottom. And this is the default behavior that you would expect on an iOS application. So if you're looking at many of the applications, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you'll see that tabs are generally on the bottom. They also generally use an icon, whereas on Android, they're generally displayed at the top. So if I switch style to Android, you'll now see them displayed at the top. And this is done using the behavior services that we have built into FireMonkey. You can manually overwrite this if you want, but using the behavior services, you're able to leverage the built-in functionality that ensures that you're adhering to the platform guidelines. So I'm going to select tab item 1, and I can go to style lookup here, and I can now select from many different predefined icons. You could also, if you wanted to, you could also load your own custom icon. And this supports multiple resolutions. So you could, for example, load in a 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x icon that would ensure that your graphic looks nice across all the different target platforms. So in this case, I'm just using the default ones. And you'll see now if I switch this back to Android, at the top here, I don't see the icons because traditionally on Android, you don't have tab items with icons. So now if you wanted to have all your application UI be the same across all the target platforms, then all you'd have to do is just to finish building it and you'd be ready to go. Now, what if you wanted to have a different UI or some differences between iOS and Android? Now, if you select a master here, you can see all the different available devices. And these are views that allow you to fully customize your user interface in the Fire UI multi-device designer. So as I mentioned in the presentation earlier during the slides, you don't need to create a view for every device, but you should create at least one for each target platform if you want to have any UI differences or want to have any code changes in your application that are specific to a particular target platform. So for example, let's say you want to have different behavior on iOS than Android. All you'd have to do is select a single iOS view. So for example, iPhone 4.7, that's equivalent to the iPhone 6 or iPhone 7. And then you could make changes on this view. So for example, now I'm on tab item 1. I'm going to add a label. And I'm going to change the text here just to make it easier to identify. iPhone 4.7 inch. Okay, so this is my iPhone 6 device. Now, if I go back to the master, you will see that on the master, it still says label 2. So the way that this works is any changes that you're making on the master itself are propagated and streamed down to the views. Any changes you're making on the view itself are particular to that view. So for example, if I just have an iPhone 4.7 inch device here or view, then anytime I'm running this application on an iOS target device, so any iPhone or any supported iPad, it would show the UI that I'm showing here if I have a single platform view. So right now I have a single iPhone view, which means that at runtime it would use this as the guideline for iOS. The same is true if I create a single Android view. So what that means is any changes I make that I want to have only executed on Android, any UI changes, any code changes, it would be sufficient to just make them on a single view. Again, that's assuming that the UI would be the same across all the target platforms, across your target platform and all the devices within Android. So you can see now, if I go back here to Android 5 inch and I change this text label to Android 5 inch. you will see that if I go back to the master, it still says label 2. And this is because I did not make the change on the master itself. If you're making a change on the master, that's actually streamed into each of the views. However, if you're making a change on the view, then any further changes you're making on the master will not affect the changes you made on the view. So for example, if I change this label 2 here to say master, and then go to my iPhone 4.7 view, you'll see that it does not say master, but instead says iPhone 4.7. If I go to Android 5-inch, it says Android 5-inch. And that's because this is view specific. Now, if you wanted to have a tablet UI and a phone UI, and you wanted to have distinct differences between the two, then you should select at least one phone form factor and one tablet form factor for your target platform. So for example, if I wanted to have support iOS with both an iPhone view and a tablet view, then I would create an iPhone device layout or view, and I would create an iPad view. And then on the iPad, for example, I could add additional UI elements, etc. Now, generally speaking, what I would recommend you do is you go back to the master, you lay out your entire application with as many common elements as you ultimately want to have, including elements that you would hide on a phone form factor because you have less screen real estate. Put all your application logic on the master, all the UI elements on the master, and then go into each of the views and hide the UI elements that you don't want to show, because that will save you a lot of time ultimately. For example, if you wanted to have a phone form factor for iOS and Android, and you wanted to have that UI look distinct on a phone versus a tablet, but have everything else be the same, it would still make sense to make those changes on the master before you actually create each of the views. Because as you saw, any changes you make on a view are specific to that view. So if you want to do a lot of customizations, then it might make sense to make all those changes on the view. But for most applications, it makes most sense to lay out at least the majority of the application on the master and then create your specific views and make the changes there as needed. So for example, if you wanted to have an iOS view and a different UI for iPhone and iPad, you would create an iPad view and at least one iPhone view. At runtime, it's going to determine which view to show based on which one is the closest matching based on your device and resolution. And you can also create your own custom views for devices that are not represented here. Generally speaking, the devices represented here should be sufficient for most applications today and most form factors today, but there are specific layouts that you might want to support, and maybe you want to do, some UI tweaking based on specific phone form factors that are not represented here. You can actually create your own custom views and then install them into the IDE, and they will show up right here in the drop-down menu. And we have some great blog posts and instructions on how to do that. Now, a common UI element that many applications use today is a slide and drawer or a pop-up menu or a docked panel. And for that, we've created a control called the multi-view control, Team Multi-View. And this control also leverages the behavior services support that we have built into FireMonkey. The same behavior services that we have with the tab control that determines whether the tabs are shown at the bottom or top, for example, depending on the target platform. And just like with the tab control, you can go to your tab position, you can select platform default, which in that case, it will actually leverage the built-in behavior services that are part of FireMonkey to determine whether it's being run on an iPhone or an Android device, and then either display the tabs at the bottom or the top. The same also is built into the Team Multi-View control, and we have a demo here that's part of 10.1 Berlin that you can have a look at. And you'll see that Team Multi-View also has a platform behavior mode. When that is selected, it has built-in modes and built-in behavior depending on target device and platform and orientation. So for example, if you have platform behavior selected here and are running this on an iOS device, and I'll just create an iPhone view, here, you'll see that this is intended to be shown as a slide-in drawer. So you have the drawer icon here, and this will then be shown as a slide-in drawer. If I rotate this device, it will still be shown as a slide-in drawer because I'm on a phone form factor. If I select an iPad, for example, it will be shown as a slide-in drawer or a popover in portrait mode. But if I rotate my device and it's shown in landscape mode, then this will be displayed as a docked panel. And this is part of the behavior services and the functionality that we've built into the multi-view control. And the multi-view control has a property called master button, and that is the UI element that you want to use to invoke the slide-in drawer or the docked panel. So for example, you can select a speed button, and then you can link it here via the master button property. If you wanted to have the same behavior across all your target platforms, regardless of orientation or form factor, so for example, regardless of whether the application is running in portrait or landscape mode, or it's running on a phone or a tablet, you could select mode here and you could select drawer, for example, or custom and create your own custom settings. For each of the modes, there are also predefined properties that you can customize. For example, for the docked panel, you can select the split view appearance, you can select shadow options, etc. So it's a very customizable control. Now, of course, with Fire UI and the multi-device designer, you can also work with custom styling. And the way that's done is you can drag and drop a stylebook control onto your form. And the first thing you want to do to be able to use the stylets that will ultimately load into the stylebook is go to the form, and then in the object inspector, select your stylebook. And then all you have to do is double click and select open and load one of the styles. So in this case, I'm going to select the Windows 10 Modern Blue style. And you can see here in the structure pane, this is the actual structure of that style. And the integrated style designer makes it easy to quickly make some changes to an existing style. For example, if you wanted to change the background color, etc. And you can see the hierarchy of each of the style elements here. So I'm going to close it. And this allows me to apply the style. And this is a Windows 10 style. So you can see right here, I have my Windows 10 style. And it's really easy to apply the style for each style book. And then you can actually select style collection, and you can set the name of the platform. So for example, Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. And then you can load each style for each platform so that at runtime, it will automatically load the appropriate custom style. And that's only if you want to work with custom styles instead of the built-in platform styles. I'm going to delete the style book. By default, we have built-in styles as part of each of the target platforms. So at runtime, you'll see the OS 10 style. At design time, you'll also see the styling here. And the same is also true for iOS and Android. Each of the styles has the built-in style elements that you can select from. And so, for example, here, if I select my tab item and go down to the style book, I can select from many different UI elements. And these are part of the style. And in a little while, I'm going to show you a demo of how you can create a custom style using the Bitmap Style Designer, which is the same tool that we use internally to build all of our UI styles. So that will be a great example, and you'll see actually the process of creating that style and then how to have the style element actually appear in the Style Lookup drop-down menu. And next, I'm going to show you a demo of how to create your own custom style for T-Switch using the Bitmap Style Designer. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to create a custom style for my Windows application for the T-Switch control. So if I drag and drop T-Switch onto my form here, you can see that if I select the Style Lookup menu, I have a single style option. And what I want to do now is apply a modern Windows 10 style to this control and then customize that style. So to get started, I'm going to go to Tools, Bitmap Style Designer, and this brings up the Bitmap Style Designer. And this is the tool that we also use to create all of our styles, the default styles and the premium styles. And so I thought today I'd walk you through the steps of creating your own custom style. So the way the Bitmap Style Designer is designed is you'll see here that we have kind of a blank form or a getting started point with a style PNG, and we have a lot of templates that you can choose from. So in this case, we're going to choose File New. Click right here, and we're going to select a new Windows Modern style. And this gives us a Windows 10 style template. So now if I expand the images node here, you'll see we have style, which is the 1x style, This is also the style that's used at design time, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. Now, we provide 3x to account for high-resolution devices. This is something you don't necessarily need to do for Windows application and when you're creating a custom style, but it's recommended. So what you can see here is I have the different styles. So now what I want to do, I want to go in and actually customize the style for T-Switch. Here you can see the style elements that are part of the switch control. So this is a round shape. This is in the Windows 10 style. And I want to replace that with my own custom style. Now I'm going to move over to Photoshop and I'm going to show you how I created the style elements for the switch control style. Now you don't need to use Photoshop, you can also use another image editing program, but my goal today was to show you and give you a better understanding of how to lay out the style elements that you will ultimately use to create a custom style for either all of your controls or some of the controls in your application. So here's a layout that I have created. You can see this is the switch frame, this is the fill, and then we have the thumb that is activated as you're sliding the switch control. So we need our graphic in 4 different resolutions, 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. And we also have to follow those naming conventions. So what I have here, as you can see, I have a transparent PNG. And this is the layout I've created for my switch. The way that I did this is I just did File, New in Photoshop, and you select your pixels. So in this case, I've set it to 180 pixels by 120 pixels. I've zoomed in, so it's easier to do the layout. And then I've just used the rectangle tool to draw a shape. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool here, and in this case, I'm going to deselect the fill color and just do a stroke outline. So this is my rectangular shape, and then I can just right-click and select Duplicate Layer. And this below here is going to be, I'm going to move this down. This is going to be the filled shape, the filled frame. And now what I'm going to do is go back to my control here, and I'm going to select a fill color. And I'm going to deselect the stroke. So this is a good example of the frame and the fill colors. You can see this matches what I did right here. And then we want to create the thumb. So one of the things you could do, of course, as well, is you could select your original rectangle. You could select, right-click it, and select Duplicate Layer. Then you select it and move it over, and then now you could resize it, and that ensures that it has the proper height. And now you can fill this. Again, you go back to the rectangle. I'm going to change the fill color, let's say to blue. The stroke, I don't want to show a stroke on the thumb graphic, and then I can right-click this again, and I could go ahead and select Duplicate Layer. Use the Move tool, and I can go move down the shape. And I can go and select a rectangle again, and I'm going to change this to a different fill color. You don't need to start out with a 180 by 120 pixel graphic. That's really up to you. Ultimately, what you want to do is you want to start out with a shape that's large enough that when you are done saving this out as the 3x graphic, and you should follow the same naming convention. So I have switch 30x, and then you should do switch 20x for 2x, switch 15x for 1.5x, and switch.png. There's no number for the 1x. Because the actual Bitmap style designer looks at the naming convention of the PNGs that you're adding to determine the resolution of those graphics. So it's really important that you're following the same naming convention. So then if you wanted to resize this, you could go to image size and you could select 50%, for example, to go from 3x to 1.5x. And then you would go back and go to File, Save As, and you would save this out as your PNG. For example, my switch 1.15x.png. Okay, so now let's go back to the Bitmap Style Designer. So right here, I'm going to select Images, I'm going to select Add, and I'm going to browse to my folder where I have my switch graphics. So this is switch.png, this is my switch 1x size. And I'm going to go to switch 15x. So now I'm going to add my 2x resolution switch control graphic. And then I'm going to add my 3x resolution graphics. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the objects tree. And then right over here, I'm going to select to add a new switch element. Okay, So here it is, and you can see it has a frame and a thumb. So I'm going to select style object 1_switch, and I'm going to rename this to a new name. And the new name is what you will ultimately see when you have the style loaded and applied to your application in the style lookup drop-down menu. So this name here is what you will see in the style lookup drop-down. So I'm going to say my custom switch code range. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select frame and I'm going to select bitmap. Going to go to 1x right here, and you can zoom in because you want to map out this control, so it makes it a lot easier if you're able to zoom in. And so for frame, I just want this graphic right here. The purple color is actually to indicate the transparency. So I'm going to click up here, and then I'm going to control click down here and hit apply. And for pressed, I'm going to select the green color, which is the fill color for my switch control, and then control click right here, and you just want to outline the graphic. Select apply, and then I'm going to right click onto the new switch control and select automatically adjust object for all graphic resolutions. So what that means is, as you saw, I just mapped out the frame control, mapped it to the frame and the fill color, and I only did that for the 1x resolution. So in order not to have to manually go through and actually do that for all the resolutions, all I had to do is select automatically adjust objects, and you'll see that this has added the other style objects. So this has added a frame for 1.5x. This has added a frame for 2x and for 3x. And if I go and select bitmap for 3x, for example, you can see that this is already mapped to my graphic. Now we want to do the same for the thumb. So for the thumb, we're going to select bitmap, and we're going back to 1x. Click, and then control click, hit apply, and we're going to select bitmap pressed, 1x, and we're going to select it, and then control click, and hit apply. And again, we want to apply and propagate those changes to 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. So we're going to go up here and select automatically adjust object for all graphic resolutions. So that applies all the changes across all the graphics. And then you can also right click here and select test object style. And you can test that for all the resolutions. So you can right click here and select test object style with 2x resolution, and then you're able to test the 2x resolution. So now I'm going to save my style. And then I'm going to actually save it out. So first I just saved my style template, and I'm going to save out my style as a FireMonkey style. So you want to select .style from the drop-down menu and hit save. And I'm going to close the Bitmap Style Designer. So now I'm going to drop a style book onto my form. I'm going to load my custom style. I'm going to browse to the location right here. We have the style code range.style. That's the style that we just created. I'm going to close this and apply the style to the style book. Then on the form, I'm going to activate and select the style book. Now you can see it has the Windows 10 style. And if I select T-Switch and I go to the style lookup, you can see now I have my custom switch. This is my code range custom switch style element. And if I resize the object inspector pane here, you can see that the style element has the exact name that I assigned earlier via the Bitmap Style Designer. So let's hit run and we can have a look at the style. Now you can see that this control currently has a fixed size. So what if I want to resize the control and make it resizable? I can go back to Tools, Bitmap Style Designer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load my style template. Going back to my location right here, the .vsf file, that's my style template. Then I'm going to expand the objects node. And under the objects node, I'm going to browse to my custom switch underscore code range, select a frame, and I'm going to set margins. So I'm going to set 2 here for margin bottom, left, right, and top. And I'm going to do the same for the thumb. And by setting margins, we're enabling the ability to resize the control. So after setting that, I'm going to right click and select automatically adjust object for all graphic resolutions. And then if you have a look here, for example, it automatically sets the proper margins for 1.5x, for 2x, etc. I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to save this out as a style file again. So for example, code range, style code range 2. And then I'm going to load the style. Double click on the style book, select the style, close the style editor. And then you can see here now I can go in and actually resize the control. So this gives you the extra flexibility if you want to have a style that has a resizable switch control. The Bitmap Style Designer has many predefined platform-specific templates that you can use and customize to your liking. So for example, I can select New Android L Light Style, and if I select Images and expand the Images node here, you'll see that I have 4 style graphics: my 1x graphic, my 1.5x, my 2x, and my 3x graphic, and I have an accompanying anti-indicator graphic for each of the 4 resolutions. Now, if I wanted to change the color scheme from green, so from a green accent, for example, to a red accent, all I'd have to do is select Export, select the destination folder, select that folder, and hit Export. This is now going to export all of these graphics into my Code Rage test folder. And if I browse to my Code Rage test folder, you can see that I have all 8 graphics here. And what I can do is I can go back over to Photoshop, and then in Photoshop I can open up my graphic and I can go to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and I can quickly adjust these values to change the overall color scheme. So for example, I can change the hue and saturation to change the accent color from a green to a shade of red. Hit OK, and then all I have to do is save this PNG and apply the same changes that I just made to the 3x resolution to the 2x, 1.5x, and 1x. It would also make sense to make the same change to the anti-indicator graphics so that you have a new comprehensive updated style. Save out those PNG files, and then go back to the Bitmap Style Designer and update the graphics and replace the current green graphics with the new updated red ones. So here inside the Bitmap Style Designer, I can select Update, and then I'm going to browse to my red graphics here. Style PNG, this is my 1x resolution, and I'm going to repeat the same steps for the other resolutions. And last, the 3x resolution. As you can see, in this case, I didn't update the anti-indicator graphic, but that's something that you could easily do by performing the same steps I just showed you inside of Photoshop. I'm going to save this as my red template. Saving it out as a template will make it much easier later on if you want to make additional changes to this style. You don't have to start from scratch. You can just open the template and make the changes. And then the last step is to save this out as a style file that can be consumed by FireMonkey. So I'm going to change this to my red Android Code Rage style. Hit save. And now here I have an example project open. This is the mobile controls project. I'm going to drop a style book onto my form. I'm going to select Form and navigate to Stylebook, select Stylebook 1. Double click on the stylebook and then browse to the location where my red style is located and select my red Android style and hit close, apply the changes. And then you can see here now we have the red accent color throughout the different controls. And if I set this control, for example, to is checked, you can also see the red accent color here. So this is how quick and easy it was to change the overall color scheme of a style using the predefined templates, bringing them into Photoshop, quickly adjusting the hue and saturation, saving those updated graphics back out as PNGs, and then just re-importing them into the Bitmap Style Designer to create an updated look and feel. Now, to get started, we're going to drop a Listview control onto our form and a prototype bind source component. The prototype bind source component allows us to quickly work with some sample data that we can populate our list with. Now I'm going to align my list here to the client, and I started out with a basic header footer template. I'm going to bring up the Live Bindings Designer, and I'm able to visually bind my list control into some sample data. So I'm going to select the item text property, and I'm going to bind it into bitmap name. So here you see a scrollable list with some sample data at design time. Now, if we have a closer look at our item appearance modes for the item, we can choose from a variety of built-in modes, such as image list item bottom detail, right button, etc. Now, new in RAD Studio 10.1 Berlin is this new dynamic appearance mode. The dynamic appearance mode works in conjunction with the new Listview items designer. So the first thing we need to do for the item property, select dynamic appearance. And then what we can do is we can go back into item appearance, select item, and you will see the option here to add new appearance modes. So this first new object is text 1. So I'm going to bind text 1 into bitmap name, and you can see this is aligned to the center here. And next thing I'm going to do is add another object. I'm going to add an image object, and I could rename this, for example, to my image. And then I'm going to add another object. I'm going to add another text object and rename this to small text, for example. Text 3, small text. And this just makes it a lot easier as you're navigating through the Live Bindings Designer to identify the elements you're looking to bind to. So in this particular case here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind into the text 1 into bitmap 1, bitmap name 1, my image into bitmap 1, and a small text label property into color name. Now what I can do is I can right click on my list view here and toggle the design mode. This brings up the list view item designer. I'm just going to close the Live Bindings Designer here, and I can now go in and actually adjust the position, the fonts, etc., other settings for my controls. So in this particular case, I'm going to position the image on the left. I'm going to adjust the width of my small text element here to 120 pixels, and the width of my other text element to like 130. And I'm going to position it here. And again, I can move the text elements around. I'll make it a little bit wider. And I can select the text vertical align. So for example, leading, trailing, center. I can also select the text alignment. So for example, leading. I'm going to move this up just a little bit. And I'm going to adjust the settings on the text element itself, set it to bold, and adjust the font size. And move it up just a little bit. Okay, and now the small text item I'm going to position, grab and position right underneath here. And I'm going to adjust the text align to leading. So it's positioned under my item text. And I'm going to change it to bold and a different text color. For example, steel blue. As I move out of the design mode, you can see that layout pattern that I've just designed for my item is repeated across my entire list. And you can fully customize this as you want. You can go in and add additional image objects, you can add additional text objects, you can add accessory, you can add a text button object, a glyph button object, etc. And it's really easy to just go back into this design mode. So you can toggle the design mode via right click, and then you can exit the design mode.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shrina, for that great presentation. There was a lot of content covered there. If anyone has any questions, they can put them in the question panel now if you're watching live with us, and Serena will get them answered for you. Are there third-party style vendors out there, or if someone wants to get a style, are there other places they can get styles from?
There are several different vendors that have developed tooling around kind of customizing and creating your own styles. I think there are a couple that are in the works. I don't have anything specific at this point to point to in regards to, people that are building and selling their own styles. We do have the premium style pack that we provide as a bonus item that has about 10 or 12 additional custom styles in addition to the default ones that we provide out of the box. And every release we tend to add to that. So in the Tokyo release, which we just launched yesterday, 10.2, we added a new macOS style and a new Android Wear style. And we also have the Bitmap Style Designer in the product, which I showed as part of the presentation. And Bitmap Style Designer allows you to create your own custom styles. And so, for example, if you wanted to just change the overall color scheme of a style, then you could do what I showed in the video, which is basically export the style files, the PNG files, bring them into a image editing solution like Photoshop, and then you could go in and just adjust the colors. Now, if you wanted to change the shapes of the actual UI elements, for example, have rounded corners, etc., then you would have to create your own custom shapes and then map those onto the controls using the Bitmap Style Designer. And that's what the Bitmap Style Designer is there for, to allow you to do that. That process is a bit more involved than, of course, just changing the colors, so it really depends on what you're looking to do.
So Pat's got a question here. It's a little more involved. I'm going to try and read it here for you. So it's kind of off topic, but it says, when creating a custom visual component in 10.1, that is built with subcomponents, I'm finding that when dropping the custom component onto the form in the IDE, the component doesn't work, whereas adding the custom component manually on the form seems to work. Also, I'm finding the subcomponents of the custom component being displayed in the structure pane of the IDE. Sometimes they get doubled up if I close the project and reopen it. I'm thinking that I've done something wrong. Is there a seminar on creating custom visual components?
Well, that's a good suggestion. I think we do have some documentation on the DocWiki specifically that talks about creating visual components and creating your own visual components with step-by-step instructions. But Jim, that's something that we should add to our list of future topics for webinars. I think that would make for a great one.
Okay, I'll put you down for it. I know we had Ray Konopka did some sessions on creating custom components. I'm not sure where those are at. I should dig those up, see if those make sense to do. And then David's suggesting that, he said that there are a lot of great information here, but it's a little hard to follow along. He said it'd be great to have like a workshop type situation people could follow along on their own computer while you're doing things. That might be an interesting idea.
Yeah, that is an interesting idea. We're always looking for suggestions, so thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, I'm really trying to find new ways that we can provide training and stuff like that online, and so that might be an interesting idea, is kind of have a little bit more interactive type online workshop. Now, you touched on this already. If for high resolution screens, if you develop something, this is the form gets completely misformed on other DPIs, a special problem with styles. I need a little more information, I think, Antonio. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Serena?
Yeah, I would need some more information on it. Generally speaking, for FireMonkey specifically, we provide support for 1x, 1.5x, and 2x on Windows and Mac. So that should account for the high resolution displays, including like Retina screens on the Mac, for example. If there is additional information or issues that you've run into, my email address is displayed on the screen right now, so I would encourage you to send me a note with some additional information. If you have any quality portal bugs on it or any reproducible test cases, that would be very helpful if you could send that over to me.
I was going to say, most of the time, the stuff I've done is just worked. I have to admit that frequently I'm just doing things and it's just, oh, that worked. I don't think about it, but the slides that you used for the going through the do's and don'ts and stuff like that, can we get those and share them out to everybody?
Yes, I believe they were shared in the past, and I'll find the link, but if not, we can definitely go through and post those again.
And then Alf just shared a link for some where you can find custom styles from Ray. Yeah, Ray did custom styles, and I think he did some custom components too. Are there any new tab transition effects in Tokyo?
There are no new tab transition effects, but you could always build your own tab transition effects. So we have several that are provided out of the box. Well, we didn't add to those in this release, but you could always create your own custom effect if you wanted to have a different style transition beyond what we provide out of the box.
Do we have documentation on that? On creating
on how to create your own custom one, I'm not sure that we have documentation on it, but you could look at the source code and you could see how the other tab transitions are built that we provide out of the box. I think that would probably serve as a good starting point.
In the bad old days, we had 32 by 32 pixel icons in apps. Is there some standard default size that the iPhone would use today?
Yeah, for the I'm not sure if you're talking about app icons or actual in-application icons like the user interface icons. The user interface icons do have a standard size. We do provide the standard sizes by default as part of the style. So for example, if you put a T button onto your form and you go to style lookup and you select the action tool button, you will get the default size. And those icons are also supported with higher resolution graphics out of the box as part of the style. If you were to go online and search for iOS app icons, there are a lot of different packs available, some for free, some for sale, by many different vendors online that provide really nice looking custom UI packs that are basically PNG graphics that include all the different resolutions and all the different sizes if you wanted to go with a custom look, for example. And then in that case, you could just, if you were going with a custom look, you could put a T image onto your form, and you could use the multi-res bitmap support that we provide as part of FireMonkey to be able to load in the higher resolution graphics so that those graphics are automatically selected on higher resolution displays.
With Tokyo on iOS, why does the multi-view reset its width property when restarting Tokyo and reopening the project? I've not seen that. Victor, have you seen that, Serena?
I have not seen that. That could have something to do with depending on how the form size and the way that the form was set up on the master view. That is possible, but I'm not familiar with the particular issue. The multi-view control is a control that automatically adapts itself, so it's possible that upon opening the project, it goes through that process. But I haven't seen that issue myself.
Lots of positive feedback. Everybody really enjoyed it. A lot of great information here. Victor says, it's a pop-up, and he set it to 700, but then it goes back to 250. On Berlin, it was okay.
I haven't seen that issue. I would recommend filing a bug in the quality portal with reproducible steps if you can reproduce this issue. Generally speaking, the multi-view control has a lot of different properties that you can set. So one thing you could try doing is resizing the form on the master and then going into each of the views that you've defined, for example, for iOS and Android, and seeing if that issue persists down to the view level.
Yeah, I find that frequently, and I don't know if this is going to apply for you, Victor, or not, but I find that when I go through the process of making a step and I'm like, it's a broken, it is a bug, and then I go through it, it's like, oh, wait, nope, I'm doing something wrong. But that's probably just me. Okay, well, fantastic, Serena. There was so much great information in here, and this was really, really useful and helpful. Thanks for putting this together, and thanks for all you do in product management, and also in these great trainings you do around styles and design and stuff. That's something I am not really talented in, so it's always good to say, oh, that's a good idea. I learned about Photoshop too. I was watching this like, oh, I didn't know you could do that in Photoshop.
Well, thank you very much, and I thank you very much for everyone that joined the sessions and for participating in these webinars. And if you have specific questions, again, my email address is on the screen. Please don't hesitate to send me a note with any style or UI related questions you may have. And on that note, Rad Studio 10.2 is available, was launched yesterday. So if you haven't downloaded the trial yet, or if you're an update subscription, it's a great time now to install 10.2 Tokyo.
Yeah, actually there's some special offers going on right to the end of the month. So Tokyo came out before the end of the month, so you actually can get the pre-upgrade special offers. So it's actually probably a pretty good time to upgrade right now. Let's see. Actually, there's another question here that just came in. Peter's saying, I can right-click and select Edit Style. That opens the style editor. Is that the way that works? Any more information on that?
Yeah, we have edit style and edit custom style. We have some really good documentation on that on the doc wiki on what each of the options are. If you go to the community.embarcadero.com website and you go to my blog and you search for styles, I've done a lot of different kind of in-depth step-by-step tutorial blog posts on styling specifically and also on using the style editor. That is the built-in style editor, and that's really designed for making like small changes, adding effects to controls, etc. And also being able to load custom styles that are already predefined. So if you're using the stylebook component, for example, to load a custom style for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac, you would also be opening up the style editor to load the particular custom styles that you're looking to apply. The Bitmap Style Designer is a separate program that's designed for creating custom styles using bitmaps. And so they serve kind of two different purposes.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go. Thanks again, Serena, and thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll talk to you all later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.